I think we're live. I'm Jane Frizzell, and this is Steinbrecht Sessions. And we are going through, my hair looks all bizarro and outside. We are going through the side that my hair is going to is the opposite. Sorry. Okay, we are going through, we may go through the entire treatise at some point or as we go, but this winter session of Steinbrecht Sessions, we are going through I call it the DNA of riding, where he expounds on the two golden rules of riding. Ride your horse forward and set it straight. Now, those aren't his two golden rules, and they're not the two golden rules of German riding. Those are the two golden rules of all riding. I do believe that his expounding, his going into depth in these 5 pages, 71 through 75, are the best schooling in these two golden rules that exist today. So that is why we're going through this section, line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little, just to get this. This has to be our operating system. It is the forward riding system. So today, last week, we finished off talking about, I love his statement, thrust cannot be regulated if none exists, and the horse cannot be taught to move correctly if he does not move. And I joked that kind of, you can't really argue with that. And that's the kind of statement that if Steinbrecht were alive today, he would definitely get kicked out of the classical riding groups, even though he is the epitome of classical riding. So moving on to page 74, the top paragraph. And this may feel, this next few minutes talking about it may feel redundant. We've already said this, but he's repeating it for a reason. And riding is redundant. We do keep repeating the same things over and over in order to police ourselves that we don't deviate. I'll just start reading. If the ride, so he was talking about relative elevation, and it can't be from the hand, and it can't be from a stiff rider with dead legs, because it's the hindquarters that need to be stimulated into activity so they can be taught to desire to advance the load. If the rider wants to move the weight from the forehand to the rear, he must have a support onto which he can move the weight so that after being lifted artificially, it won't fall back onto the front again. Now, namely the forelegs. This seems like Captain Obvious, and it seems like something that we could just gloss over. But I want to bring something to everyone's attention that even at team levels, at world levels, what we are often seeing are riders who, they're not even riders, we can't call them that. People on horseback who, they're clever and they are constantly offsetting imbalance. So the horse goes this way, they skillfully move it back, or the horse goes this way, they skillfully move it this way. It is constant offsetting. It's fixing. It's grabbing a finger in this dike, finger in this side, send it this, or it goes this way, set him this way. And I think I'm going to just take this risk here. Most programs and trainers, even the trainers in the programs, are so immature that they reward and praise that kind of clever, skillful, quick thinking riding. But it's actually not what we want. I'm going to continue. The proper supports, however, can only be the stronger hindquarters, which by nature are not subjected to as much weight, when the horse is just walking around on his own and eating grass. It is therefore quite a useless and unnatural undertaking if many riders, those are the riders I was just referencing, attempt to force or fiddle or finesse their horses' heads and necks into an elevated position before they are able to cause the hindquarters under the load correspondingly with their own legs. If they just fiddle the forehand up in the air without the hindquarters on their own accepting the weight and desiring to advance it, those riders, those many riders, let's say most riders, will be forced to carry and fiddle the lifted weight themselves. That is, continuously support it with their hands this way or that way, and always just be like, it's like hot potato. They won't transfer the weight to the hindquarters, but only unnaturally bend the horse's necks. So if I'm a horse and someone makes me lift my head up, way up in the air, I'm going to get, that is not a through spread going back with the momentum of angled load bearing hindquarters going through it, is it? A lifted head, it's nothing, and actually it's kind of worse than nothing. The pole as the highest point is not sole criteria for evaluating way of going. It's and I would actually say that, like, I evaluate a horse as going from his hindquarters and his uphillness, what the Germans call the Aufrichtung. And it's this Aufrichtung, this relative elevation, that's also part of the footnote, which I expect you guys are reading the footnotes because they're very valuable. It's footnote 2. And it's littered. I mean, this idea of uphillness, relative elevation, die Aufrichtung, is through and through this entire section. And what that is that when the horse accepts more weight behind, the forehand lightens. And by forehand, I mean that which is in front of the girth. So the entire front of the horse in front of the girth lightens when the hindquarters accept load bearing. Not just have it there for a moment, like they go, oh, okay, I got it. This is what I'm going to advance. I'm doing it. I'm here. Let's go. If the horse is in all conditions and all circumstances has his own desire to advance the load by the uppermost joints of his hindquarters, his forehand is going to be uphill from his croup. His withers will be uphill from his croup. So what I was saying is, I don't evaluate a horse by where its pole is in space. I look at uphillness, croup to withers, and the activity of the hindquarters. And I can tell that the joints above the stifle, above the lower leg, and the lower leg are load bearing. Well, really, when I can see that the stifle is advancing. Let's go back to what he was saying. So this horse at the end of this first paragraph, they will not transfer the weight to the hindquarters, but only unnaturally bend the horse's back. So imagine you're a horse and someone gets you, starts hitting your upper molars with the bit. I avoid it because that's a horrible feeling, and lift your head up high. Is your back soft? Is your back spread? Is your back transmissive and conductive? No. Is the pole the highest point? Yes. Where are the hind quarters and where are the hind feet? Way back yonder, neglected out behind you somewhere, paddling behind like a duck. So this is what he's talking about. And so then he goes on, we're going to go into the first sentence of the next paragraph. Putting the weight on the hindquarters, in other words, collecting the horse must therefore begin from the back, and that by doubled activity and attentiveness on the part of his legs, the rider stimulates the hindquarters to lively and deliberate forward movement. And I like the word diligent. To lively, diligent forward movement, forward meaning that he has his own desire to advance the load. And the other little bit I would like to add to this that maybe you want to write in the margin is that putting the weight onto the hindquarters, I'm not manually putting the weight on the hindquarters. I'm training my horse. I am assigning the load to the hindquarters. I'm saying, horsey, your job is to accept the weight onto your hindquarters and diligently, under all conditions, all circumstances, desire to advance it on your own. And if my horsey says, that sounds hard, but I do want to try, you're in luck. Most horses, it'll take you a while to get them to try it. But then when they try it, and if you don't overdo it, remember that warning on page 72? They might even have a little sore in their butt that night, but they're asleep really well. They're going to have a great sleep. And then they're going to come out the next day and they're like, oh, I feel that in my buns. But then they do their march and they're like, I feel good. And they're going to feel good when they warm up the next time and you just put a few more grams on those hindquarters, and they're going to little by little start feeling really good, and they are going to fall in love with the feeling of moving well.